Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cafe on Air podcast. I am your host, Big Italy 42. Once again, here with Spencer Limbach, Spencer_JL on Twitter, and we're here to help you navigate this terrible-looking slate tonight. It's pretty ugly, top to bottom. We were talking before the show about some obvious options, but we're gonna have to definitely hunt to find some values to fit them in. So, you excited for this slate tonight, man?
Excited probably isn't the word. I mean, if you just browse these over-unders, I think there's two games over 200 in the over-under column, but yeah, it's just one of those game slates that you're going to have to get a little bit creative if you want to put out a good tournament team. So
yeah, absolutely. It seems like there's going to be quite a bit of overlap with some obvious plays that we'll get to. Quick recap from last night. If you played Anthony Davis, you probably did pretty well. Put up about 70 fantasy points. He was great last night. Not a lot of other great things. The Hornets got crushed by the Wizards, so all value there. 23 points total in the second half. So just horrible for anyone like myself who played Al Jefferson and or Mo Williams, who I fortunately didn't have much of, but I did get killed with some Al Jefferson. Looking around at everywhere else, the Heat, obviously everybody knows what that nonsense was with Spoelstra maybe just sitting back and laughing in his office, just trying to troll all of us. And we saw Dwayne Wade have a great game and nobody else. So did you get burned by the Heat last night too?
I didn't really, because I just couldn't find any options. Once the news came out on DraftKings, I was trying to switch up my lineup and I just didn't find anything I liked, so I just left it.
Yeah.
And it ended up okay for me. I'm probably better that way than if I switched up to some of the cheaper Heat players like Chalmers or something. But yeah, it was frustrating nonetheless, just waiting for that news, and it really never came until 5 minutes before game time.
Yeah, that's where I was at. I was looking to make some late changes. I had Tyler Johnson in my flex spot, but without changing out some other guys I really wanted, it wasn't going to happen. So that ended up being my best team, but no thanks to Tyler Johnson and his 9 fantasy points. We saw Chris Paul played decent amount of minutes, but was limping around a little bit. Still had 15 assists because he doesn't need to have 2 healthy legs to be able to pass the ball with ease, especially against the Timberwolves. So some strange things, though. We saw, I saw a stat that this was the first time, I believe, in 10 or 11 years that every game was decided by at least 10 points on an 8-game slate. Just pretty strange. And, I mean, games like Minnesota and the Clippers, we saw 165 total points in that one. It's supposed to be the highest one on the night. So, really strange stuff going on last night.
Yeah, I mean, and part of that was Minnesota wasn't shooting the ball well. And then for the Clippers, Paul wasn't 100%. Crawford was out. J.J. Redick was basically their only pure scorer because Paul was ineffective. So all those factors kind of weighed in. And, I mean, it would have been a smart bet in hindsight to play the under on that one.
Yeah.
But obviously, I mean, you don't really see that coming between those two predominantly high-scoring teams, but it's just how it worked out.
Yeah, same thing with Warriors and Suns. They're going just 178 total points there. Steph Curry was just ridiculously good in that second half, 36 points. I mean, he just put on a show. He knew he needed to put the game away so he could rest for a couple minutes, so he just took it upon himself to take care of that for him real quick. All right, we're going to move on to tonight and talk about FanDuel and DraftKings. We're going to go position by position like we've been doing. And we're going to start off with point guard, where there's really no top option tonight as far as paying up. No safe option like for instance, like a Russell Westbrook, like a Chris Paul, anyone like that tonight. So my top option, and I'm assuming yours as well, now with Tyreke Evans officially out for tonight, top option, dollar for dollar, has got to be Reggie Jackson against the Lakers. As we know, Lakers terrible against point guards. Reggie Jackson sitting at 7,000 on DraftKings, 6,900 on FanDuel. You have the same thinking there, that Reggie Jackson is the top option, going to be the highest owned player at point guard?
Yeah, I think everyone's of the same mindset there. Reggie Jackson's still slightly underpriced, in my opinion. He's sitting at 6.9K on FanDuel, 7K on DraftKings. I mean, the price tag has risen, but as we've mentioned before on this podcast, not sure if it's risen enough. And the matchup doesn't get any better against the Lakers, so that plus, relative scarcity at the position, I think he's going to be locked and loaded, probably well over 80% owned.
Yeah, I completely agree there, and he's got a nice usage rate up around 30% with since coming over to Detroit. So I think he's obviously in a great spot. But we probably didn't need to tell any of you that because you already knew about Reggie Jackson. If we go down a little bit further, you've got some other options. George Hill has been playing well. Orlando's been giving up a decent amount to point guards, so I think he's a fine option. But being similarly priced to Reggie Jackson, unless you're going to roll both of them, he's at 6.3 on FanDuel and 6.4 on DraftKings. So I don't think he's a must-play by any means, but I think he's one of the safer options at a surprisingly unstable point guard position today.
Yeah, I think going him and Reggie Jackson on FanDuel is, like you said, an extremely safe option. You could dig down a little deeper as we get into it, but yeah, I like this matchup for him. Playing at home against Orlando, and the past few games he hasn't been, himself really. He hasn't really hit value, but I mean, he hasn't been bad either. So I think the good matchup would probably, push him through it, and he's able to reach value tonight.
Yeah, I mean, are you investing in either Kyrie Irving or Kyle Lowry? Because outside of tournaments, for me, maybe Kyle Lowry, or I guess you could look at Irving, but price up around $8,000. I don't think that's a route that I'm going to be taking tonight.
I'm not doing that. I'm probably FanDuel, where you have to roster 2 point guards. It's going to be Reggie Jackson, somewhat cheaper.
Yeah, completely understand. As I'm going down a little bit further, maybe I'm being a homer on this one as being a Spurs fan, but Tony Parker is playing great basketball right now. You got him at 5,800 on FanDuel, 55 on DraftKings. You look at his last 3 games, he's averaging 25 points a game. Not huge assist totals, but kind of getting it done for the Spurs offense that was really struggling there for a little while. And I think if he maintains his production right around low 30s in minutes, I think that he makes for a great play. Someone who will very soon be priced at least mid 6Ks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm labeling him a tournament option, probably tournament only, just because, I mean, you really don't know what they're going to need from him night to night. Yeah, he's been the man the past 2 games, but leading up to that, I mean, he's going to play 20 minutes and take 5 shots. Maybe he'll fall into that role tonight. Maybe he'll keep the momentum going. I mean, we really don't know what this game script's going to call for. So with that rationale, he's a tournament option in my book, and really nothing more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from my perspective, I seem to think, the Spurs playing well, so, when that team's clicking, there's a lot of production to go around, but it's definitely spread out. So definitely some risk there, but I think he's definitely a great price tag play right there. Mm-hmm. Going down a little bit further, you got guys like Jordan Clarkson, who similarly priced to Jeremy Lin, and I was a little surprised last time the Lakers played, saw Jeremy Lin twice as highly owned in tournaments. A little bit strange to me considering Clarkson with more minutes solidified for the most part. I mean, he's been playing mid-30s his last 4, 33 or more, and 4 of the last 5, I should say. And, I mean, he's been playing well, so I think I prefer him to Lin tonight just because he's a little bit safer. But, I mean, both of them in a pretty good spot because Reggie Jackson, not a great defender there either.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And, yeah, Lin's minutes are kind of trending downward. Not really sure what's up with that. We know the Lakers really like to mix up their rotation, so not really sure if he's on the outs right now or what's going on. But, yeah, Clarkson's definitely the safer option of the two, and they're really at the same price tag, at least on FanDuel. So, I'm leaning that way if I had to pick between the two.
Yeah, I'm on board with that as well. Looking at Rajon Rondo, kind of the flavor of the week, a guy who wasn't seeing a lot of minutes. We've seen he's had more minutes now. Devin Harris has missed the last 2 games. He's either questionable or game time decision tonight. Hard to say. I've seen kind of conflicting reports for today, so I'm just going to assume game time decision. Think worst case, and all that really does would just be open up a couple more minutes for Rondo, who's priced at $5,600 on FanDuel, $6,400 on DraftKings, a little bit more than I'd like to pay for him, but he's been producing at a fairly high level, finally. But at the same time, there's still that risk in Rondo, always a low floor, and I mean, You like the matchup against Cleveland, but as we've seen, Cleveland can slow down the pace a lot. They did it to the Suns the other day, so not a guy that I'm investing in a whole lot tonight.
Yeah, I agree. And Cleveland's playing a lot better defense as of late, just in general. So even if Rondo sees the minutes, which aren't really a given at this point, he's still going to have to work for it to get value. And like we said, there's other guys who are probably a bit more stable. Jordan Clarkson, Tony Parker, and we'll get into a few more here. I'd probably rather go that route than take a chance on Rondo in this spot.
Yeah, and it seems on my end that both of those guys will probably be a little lower owned than Rondo as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, with Tyreke Evans being out for tonight's game, seems like Norris Cole should get the start. Obviously, nothing official yet, but that's kind of what we assume is going to happen. And he's not a great point per minute guy, but seems like he's going to be a pretty safe play there at 3,800 tonight. Should see, I would assume, right around 30 minutes. 3,800 on FanDuel and 3,300 on DraftKings. So if you're looking for the punt play at point guard, Norris Cole's got to be the way to go, right?
Yeah, I mean, I really like it, and if you look at these game logs, he's playing a little bit alongside Tyreke Evans and a little bit backing him up. So if you're playing alongside Tyreke, that really eats into your production because he's going to be the guy handling the ball. Now Cole should be the guy. The offense should. Well, I mean, I'm not going to say it runs through him because it runs through Anthony Davis, but
finally,
yeah, he'll get a lot more opportunities with Evans off the court, and yeah, I think that's a great pick. He's probably one of the better cheap picks, near minimum salary picks of the night. So yeah, he's someone I'll definitely have probably in majority of my lineups.
Yeah, and you like to think, I mean, there's a couple of things working in his favor. If Anthony Davis gets double-teamed down low, maybe he gets kicked out to an open jumper, maybe he just dishes it down low and Anthony Davis does what he's been doing. I mean, he shot 17 for 23 last night. So you get him the ball down there in that painted area, and it's pretty much a lock for 2 points and an assist.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other cheap guys you're looking at? I know Alexei Shved's been a guy a couple people have been on. I think he's risky, but he's an okay cheap play for a tournament. You looking at him, or is there anyone else you're looking at point guard tonight?
You're looking at Shved. He's probably the same price as Cole, maybe a little more expensive. But, yeah, if Tim Hardaway Jr. is out again, he is an option. Otherwise, just write him off if Hardaway Jr. is in. But that's a tough matchup at Utah, playing on a back-to-back. I just really don't like the spot, and I'd rather go with Cole, especially if he's starting point guard. We'll see more minutes. We'll have the ball a lot more. The game will likely be closer. I mean, I'd rather go that route.
Yeah, I agree. And as awful as the Knicks are, I'm going to be avoiding Knicks as much as I possibly can tonight. So this slate's already ugly enough. Having to have players from the worst team in the history of the world doesn't necessarily inspire much confidence tonight.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to shooting guard, we've got the number one, price-wise, number one option, Victor Oladipo, 8,000 on FanDuel, 8.4 on DK. We were talking about it a little bit before the show. He's been obviously a really popular play, playing great recently, but Nikola Vucevic expected to be back tonight, listed as probable right now, so obviously we're assuming he goes. Not a great matchup against one of the slower-paced teams in the league. Oladipo kind of thrives in that faster pace, you know, the up-tempo type of games. And you also got to think, he's played 40 or more minutes, 3 straight games. Maybe they give him a little bit of a couple minutes of rest tonight if possible. I mean, you've obviously got Evan Fournier out, so not a whole lot of depth there. But I'm just not sure that I'm willing to pay that price tag for him in this matchup.
No, I mean, especially not on DraftKings, where he's 8,400 and he's 8,000 on FanDuel. Both of those are really high, especially on DraftKings. But yeah, I'm probably the way lineup configuration's going as of this morning, he's not someone that's really easy to fit in. I'd rather go value at shooting guard. And like you said, matchup isn't that good. Price is inflated. Vucevic is back. And I just really don't think I'm going to go that route.
Yeah, and there's a guy around that similar price tag that you had mentioned before the show that we'll get to in a little bit. So if we're talking purely price and not position specific, I think there's a guy that's a much better play right around that price. Next up on shooting guard, we've got DeMar DeRozan, 7,400 on FanDuel, 72 on DraftKings. Not an ideal matchup, of course, against the Spurs. Been playing pretty solid defense recently, but highest total on the night, 205 points. DeRozan, you look at his last 4 games, at least 24 real points in each game, and 39 or more fantasy points in 3 of the 4 if you're looking on FanDuel. Only exception being that Cleveland game where it was pretty much all scoring, no peripherals for him. I think he's in play. I think he's, if I'm paying up at shooting guard, I'm preferring him over Victor Oladipo. How about you?
Yeah, especially on DraftKings. The pricing gap isn't quite as wide on FanDuel, so it's a little more of a discussion there. But I don't know if I like him that much because he can be scoring dependent, and that's not really a great recipe against the Spurs, who could slow you down. I mean, especially if you get something going. But yeah, there's definitely rationale there. Considering this is the highest scoring game of the night, he is the leading scorer for the Raptors. If they have a chance of staying in this game, it's through him. So yeah, I could see the merit in that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some risk with him as well, though. I better make sure we touch on that. If he's matched up on Danny Green's an underrated defender, one of the better on-ball defenders in the league at shooting guard. Also, maybe Popovich decides to go ahead and put Kawhi Leonard on DeMar DeRozan, having him guard there, in which case that makes it a pretty terrible matchup for DeRozan. Maybe Terrence Ross ends up getting the softer matchup there. But so I think definitely some risk with DeRozan. I think the Spurs will probably get creative on defense trying to slow him down.
Yeah, and that's basically what I'm getting at, is that, I mean, even if DeRozan gets the softer matchup to begin with, if he gets going, they're going to stick Kawhi on him right away.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I could easily see that happening. So, I mean, that's where my hesitation lies for the most part.
Yeah, and you got to assume Kyle Lowry's going to have the easier matchup either way because Tony Parker not a good defender, especially at his age.
Yeah.
Next up, we've got Monte Ellis, 6,800 on both FanDuel and DraftKings. Matching up against Cleveland, we already talked about how they're playing much better defense. Ellis was struggling pretty bad with his shot until finally breaking out in the last game. But go ahead and look at who they were playing. Los Angeles Lakers. I like to think you or I could have a pretty nice game against the Lakers as well. Maybe not quite 31 points, but I'm not overreacting too much to that. I think that Ellis is still a fine play, but not someone I'm going to be searching to put in my lineups tonight because given that tough matchup.
Yeah, I'm of the same mentality pretty much. And just looking at the slate, it really looks like a studs and scrubs night for the most part. I mean, yeah, there's a few reliable mid-range options like Reggie Jackson and whatnot, but yeah, Ellis really doesn't fit into that model. I mean, granted, his price tag is okay considering he's averaging like 30 fantasy points for the season. But, I mean, yeah, you look at the recent production, and it hasn't really been there with the exception of the last game. Yeah, I mean, the price tag is okay, but, yeah, I find myself digging down a little deeper when it comes to shooting guard.
Yeah, I agree. A guy that you had mentioned for the show, we're kind of looking at here, more so on DraftKings where he's 5,300. He's at 61 on FanDuel. Eric Gordon, probably going to be asked to help out with some production with Tyreek Evans out. Obviously, Anthony Davis can only do so much, but Anthony Davis is so much as a lot more than anyone else is on this slate. So you got to think that Davis gets a ton of production, but there's got to be a few more shots as well for Gordon. Not for me on FanDuel at that price, but I definitely think he's in play on DraftKings.
Yep, I'm of the same mentality, really. And, yeah, you just look at the relative pricing. We're going to get into it a little bit more with some of these guys, but Rodney Stuckey, Joe Johnson, all those guys who are below him on FanDuel are above him on DraftKings. So, I mean, you look site to site like that, he makes for probably one of the better value plays at shooting guard there as of right now. So, yeah, I'll probably have definitely some shares of him over on BK.
Yeah, you already mentioned Rodney Stuckey. Obviously coming off the bench, but a guy that kind of fills up the stat sheet in any way he possibly can. You look at his last few games, I mean, he's mid to high 20s with a ceiling of over 40 just about every game. Obviously a slower pace, but he's used to it, obviously, being on the Pacers. I don't think it's a tough matchup, really, for him at all against Orlando. I think he'll be fine against both Oladipo or Peyton, depending on whether he's controlling the point or not. And neither one of those guys great defenders. Peyton, okay, better in college than he has been so far in the pros. But I think that Stuckey is a guy that is definitely interesting tonight.
Yeah, I really like him on FanDuel, where you have to roster 2 shooting guards, and his price is more agreeable at $5,500. And Orlando ranks 22nd. Let me see here. Yeah, 22nd in defensive efficiency versus backcourt members. So, I mean, there's a little bit of a matchup advantage there as well. And, yeah, I mean, like you said, looking through the game log, he's been producing. He's been surpassing value, except for that one game against the Knicks where he got 19 minutes randomly. That kind of looks like a quirk because he's been seeing over 30 minutes every game before that and after that. And another thing is he's not really shooting the ball well right now. I mean, you look at the past 4 games and he's shooting 30%, 38%, 33%, and he's still hitting value. He's still surpassing value. So, I mean, if he comes out and has a great shooting night or even above average shooting night, I mean, there's definitely some profit potential.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like to think that he has, especially among the value plays at shooting guard, probably the highest ceiling. So, yeah. I mean, and we've seen it even a couple times in the last 10 games with Stuckey. So, I think especially if you roll multiple lineups on FanDuel, got to get yourself some Stuckey exposure, because if he goes off on a shorter slate like this, you might be behind pretty quickly. Yeah. Anyone else you're looking at shooting guard? There's not a whole lot of other options I really like. You like Danny Green, seems like a fine option. He's got a safe floor, 4.6 on DraftKings, 5.2 on FanDuel. Joe Johnson's got a great price on DraftKings at 5.2, but more of a tournament play. Who else are you liking here?
One guy I'm not going to lock into cash games, but he's on my radar maybe for a tournament, is Caldwell Pope of Detroit. He's still getting the minutes. He's still playing 30, 34 minutes a game. The recent production has been pretty terrible if you look at it. But his price on DraftKings is like $4,100, and he's $4,900 on FanDuel. I probably wouldn't go that route. But, yeah, if you're looking for someone to fill that shooting guard spot, which, I mean, shooting guard really isn't strong today, as we've said. If you like the rest of your lineup and you just need a shooting guard in that range, he has a great matchup, and he's seeing the minutes, so you could go that route.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like if you're worried about it and you need a guy to fill in, go ahead and just look at someone playing the Lakers on a night like tonight. Yep. And go ahead and slot them in.
Yep.
Moving on here to small forward, and once again, a pretty barren position. We don't need to tell you about LeBron James and what he can do. 10.7K on FanDuel, 10.5 on DraftKings. So actually a pretty big price drop since his last game. Two games of a little bit lesser production from LeBron James in his last 2 games, 34 and 34 fantasy points, but we know what he's capable of. So especially on a site like FanDuel where you do have to roster 2 small forwards, there are not a lot of options. So if you're going some of those cheap routes other ways, you might be best served going ahead and just putting LeBron in your lineups tonight.
Yeah, definitely. And Cleveland's playing on the road tonight, so that kind of helps his cause in terms of the blowout factor. The Cavs are favored by 5 right now, 201 over/under. So, I mean, yeah, this game should be competitive. LeBron should play down the stretch. I mean, they'll need him. And, yeah, there's just isn't that great of value options, well-priced options, I should say. So there's not much opportunity cost if you click them into your lineup.
Yeah, and you also like to think Cavs sitting in that 2 seed right now, getting close to Atlanta, coming off a loss to them. They need all the wins they can get right now because you know it's going to – seems like those are the only 2 teams going to compete in the Eastern Conference. So it's going to come down to whoever gets home court in that eventual playoff series, that hypothetical matchup down the road.
Well, I mean, if Atlanta keeps resting their guys and losing to the Sixers, then, I mean, they don't have to worry about it. But
yeah, that's true.
That's probably not going to be the case moving forward.
No, I doubt it. You look down a little bit further. Kawhi Leonard playing great basketball right now. Look over his last 6 games, 36, 38, 44, 35, 46, 35. Seems to finally be healthy, getting it done. 20 or more real points in 4 straight games. You got his matchup today against Terrence Ross and whoever else they throw out there. Maybe James Johnson gets a little bit of extra run. He's a good defender, but I think Kawhi Leonard can kind of do it all. Doesn't have to score. I think he's a fine value if you're not going for LeBron James. But once again, I still recommend you going up to LeBron.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of playing multiple lineups, so if I were to split this into two, I would probably have 2/3 of shares on LeBron, and then about a third, maybe less, maybe 25%. I'm talking cash games. Drop down to Kawhi, and then kind of bump up some other positions that are questionable. I'd probably hedge my bets that way. That way, I mean, if Kawhi goes up and has about 40 fantasy points, which we know he's capable of in this matchup, and he kind of, comes close to LeBron's total, you're kind of ahead of the pack in that regard. But like you said, LeBron is a better play, better matchup, and yeah, so I would probably look at it that way.
Yeah, and then that's a great point because Leonard has been, outside of those two huge games LeBron had, pretty similar production to LeBron. Mm-hmm. So if they both go for 40 to 45 points, you're getting a $3,100 discount there on FanDuel with Kawhi Leonard. So I think that's a smart strategy to go ahead and get a little bit of exposure there in your non-LeBron lineups. Mm-hmm. Moving on a little bit further, Chandler Parsons played decent amount of minutes last game, 35 right off the injury, a little bit surprising to me, but didn't do a whole lot, 23 fantasy points. You could look at him in a tournament, but not a guy I'm in love with.
Don't do it on FanDuel.
No.
He's, what is he on? He's 6.1 on FanDuel, 5.5 on DraftKings, so you get a little bit of a discount after factoring in the pricing differences from site to site. But, yeah, like you said, probably just a tournament.
Yeah. One guy I really want to get your take on, I kind of have a strong feeling on this guy today. Correct me if you think I'm on the wrong side of thinking. Terrence Ross, 4,100 on FanDuel, and on DraftKings, he's 4,000. Not a guy that I'm going to be playing much of today. He's very scoring dependent for the most part. I'm looking at his game against Charlotte as an anomaly. 7 assists. Hadn't had more than 2 in any other game in his last 10 games. If he's not knocking down open jumpers, he really has no value. Especially if he ends up matched up with Kawhi Leonard tonight. No thanks for me on Terrence Ross.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough because you kind of, if you want LeBron in your lineup, the way things are shaping up, you kind of have to take someone of that range. And of the guys I'm looking at, you have Ross, Wesley Johnson, and maybe Solomon Hill. And Ross probably has the higher upside out of any of those guys. Wesley Johnson, I was almost going to call him the safer pick of the three, but I'm not even sure if that's accurate because his ceiling is just... I just can't really envision a scenario where he gets more than 15 to 20 fantasy points.
Yeah. He at least has a fairly safe floor right around there at 15.
Yeah, but I mean, wouldn't you consider Ross's floor about that too?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's pretty similar. I guess it's all going to depend on the defensive scheme there for the Spurs. Because if Kawhi Leonard is, in fact, up against DeMar DeRozan, I'm fine with Terrence Ross. But if he sees more than a little bit of Kawhi Leonard, I don't see Ross doing much of anything. But yeah, I think that's a fair point. The only other guy around this price that I think you look at, and this is obviously contingent on whether or not he sees minutes tonight, which is really something is tough to predict. Mo Harkless, but you can't expect him to get many minutes tonight, especially with Vucevic back. Less production to go around. I'm not chasing the 32 fantasy points from last time.
Yeah, I don't think you really can with Vucevic back in the mix. It's too much of a stretch.
Yeah, I do think sneaky play could be James Johnson because we've seen him come in as the defensive specialist, and Kawhi Leonard the most reliable option for the Spurs right now. So maybe he sees more minutes. I mean, very hard to predict with him as you've seen. You look at his game logs, kind of fluctuating minutes. But if you're throwing someone out in a tournament, you like to think a lot more people will be on Ross for the exact same price. So I think that he's a decent swerve in a tournament, and you just hope that he sees about 25 to 30 minutes.
Yeah, and he's a very efficient producer too. So if he does see the minutes, he's pretty safe at that price range.
Yeah,
but I mean that's a big if.
Very big if. Yeah, I mean if I knew he was getting 25 minutes, I'd slot him in. But nobody knows that. I don't even think Toronto knows that right now. So elsewhere at small forward, You've got Tobias Harris has been playing pretty well, kind of flying under the radar with everyone playing Oladipo and Elfrid Payton. 3 of his last 4 over 30 fantasy points. Obviously, once again, Vucevic back, less production to go around, but I don't think that affects him a ton. Not a great matchup, but I think if you're looking for a swerve, I think he's a fine option.
Yeah, and I mean, he's probably one of the safer options of this price range because when you're looking down from Kawhi Leonard and maybe Gordon Hayward, which I don't really like tonight because of the blowout factor, but you're looking at Tobias and Chandler Parsons, really the only 2 options in that price range. So, like we said earlier, if you want to dip down from LeBron to Kawhi, I think Tobias is an okay cash game, second small forward on FanDuel if you want to go, in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on board with that. Moving over to power forward, we have just a few words for you here to start off. Play Anthony Davis, and then find out who you're going to play in your second spot. Because if you're not playing Anthony Davis on a short slate like this, his last 4 games he's averaging 33.5 points, 11.75 rebounds, and 4.5 blocks, which is good for 64 fantasy points per game on DraftKings. So if he has another big day like that, which I don't see why he wouldn't against a terrible front line, defensively at least, for Brooklyn, and, Tyreke Evans out, playing over 40 minutes, finally getting low to mid-20s in shots per game like we had hoped he would be before. I mean, he has to be a lock. He will be in every single one of my lineups tonight.
Yeah, I agree. I really don't think much more needs to be said about him.
No, and I don't even know that we needed to say that much, but I just had to reiterate the fact that if you don't play Anthony Davis and he scores 60 fantasy points tonight, you lose. Unless you get real lucky with some value plays.
Yep.
Number 2 option looks pretty obvious here. Greg Monroe, 8,100 on FanDuel and 8,100 also on DraftKings. In a great spot, of course. We don't need to tell you again about how bad the Lakers are defensively. The Lakers keep this one close. Monroe certainly in line for a big game. He's got double-doubles in 6 of his last 7 games, and the one that he didn't, he still scored 42 fantasy points. So definitely a great B option. I don't want to say 1B, but I'll say B option to Anthony Davis tonight.
Yeah, I really like him. Matchup couldn't be much better. Thing is, he's pricey. He doesn't really fit very well if you want Davis and LeBron.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the only downside there. From there, I would probably pivot down towards someone in the mid-range like David West. Decent matchup with Orlando. His price has really come down because he had a pretty, not a bad stretch, but just, below average stretch. His minutes, he's playing around 30 minutes. It's been fluctuating. But, you could look at him and maybe Dirk in that range, and I just think West is in a lot better spot.
Yeah, I completely agree, and especially on DraftKings where his price is just 5,600 as opposed to 62 on FanDuel. I like West a ton on DraftKings at that price, and like you said, it's a fine matchup. Doesn't matter. He doesn't matter. He actually does better in a slower pace, which is why he fits so well in Indiana. So I think he could be in a pretty good spot considering the only decent rebounder that Orlando has down low is Vucevic. Obviously much better than decent, but power forward position, none of those guys rebound particularly well. So I think West could be in line for a couple extra rebounds down there.
Yep.
Going down a little bit further, I'm not touching Thaddeus Young against Anthony Davis. He had a big game last game. No thanks for me. You any interest there?
No, I mean, I hate the matchup, but I mean, if he's starting and seeing minutes, he's okay. But I mean, you're just worried about foul trouble at that point.
Yeah.
Going up against Davis. But I mean, do you think they'll start him? I don't think they will. I mean, I think he's a little undersized to go up against Davis. I think.
I can see maybe they start him at the 3 if they wanted to start him for the offensive spark. But, yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. It would make more sense to go ahead and start a bigger front line.
If they had him at the 3, I think there's some merit to playing him.
Yeah.
If he's starting. But, yeah, so, I mean, other than that, I'm not really looking towards him.
Yeah, and Thaddeus Young, one of those guys that not a very Not a very elusive jumper, I'll say. And he doesn't get he doesn't have the whole Dirk motion that's hard to block. So if he's taking shots directly one-on-one against Anthony Davis, I don't know if Anthony Davis is going to have to jump to get that block. That's a free 2 points for Davis.
Yep, triple-double in blocks tonight, if that's the case.
I like that prediction, and I would not be surprised. I mean, he had 8 his first game back. So
I know.
Not too far-fetched there. Moving down a little bit further, you can look at Andrea Bargnani. I don't love him, but there's really no other options around this price. 5,600 on both sites once again. Not a terrible matchup against Derek Favors, but as we said, the Knicks are horrible. He only played 24 minutes last night because the Knicks got blown out. They may get blown out again tonight. Utah has been very good. One of the best, if not the best, defensive team in the league since the break. So I won't be investing heavily in him, but I think he's a fine option if you need someone around this price.
Yep. I mean, I agree. I don't know what his price tag is on DraftKings. Do you have that?
56 on both, actually.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I mean, I'm really definitely going with David West in that case, in probably a more competitive game, and maybe a better matchup too. But did you see what Derek Fisher said after the game last night against the Nuggets?
No.
He said something to the fact that a lot of our players have never played in this arena and at this elevation before. You know, as if that's an excuse to get beat by 30. I mean, I can see if you get beat by 10 to 15, you know, maybe that played in and you kind of lost it in the second half, but they were never in the game. And I mean, I don't think that's much of an excuse, but at the same time, playing back-to-back at Utah, which, you know, elevation plays in there too. I don't want to say that they're absolutely going to get blown out, but I mean, it looks very probable.
Yeah, I mean, the Knicks, they've only won 4 road games all year. And like you mentioned last night, they scored 25 points in the first quarter and then 53 total in the last 3 quarters. So they're just so awful right now. It's hard to invest too much in these guys because excuses are not on Derek Fisher's end. I mean, they're just a horrible team. So you can come up with whatever reasoning you want. If you're just not good at basketball, I don't think it matters where you play.
Pretty much, yeah.
I'm going down a little bit deeper. There's only one other guy I'm really considering, and more so on DraftKings. I think he's an okay punt option, definitely risky, not a cash game guy. But Patrick Patterson, 3.6 on DraftKings. He's 4.4 on FanDuel. More in play for me on DraftKings, of course, of the price decrease, but extremely inconsistent. So do not put him in your cash games. You look at his last 4, 26, 1, 11, and 26 fantasy points. So you like him as a punt?
No,
in a tournament?
I don't. Not even in tournaments. But I mean, his floor is just so low. I mean, even at that small price tag, he can destroy your team.
Yep.
If he comes out and lays an egg like that, which he has done recently. Yeah, and I don't really like it against the Spurs either, so I'm probably not doing it.
Yeah, my only thought with him is I'm obviously, once again, not playing him in a cash game. But if I can find a lineup, probably on DK, that I like with maybe LeBron and Brow and Greg Monroe, something of that nature, and he just fits, I think you could do much worse at that price.
You know, looking at it, I might go, if you really want to dig in that range, maybe Trevor Booker for Utah. Coming off the bench, he's seeing about 25 minutes regularly. And then you weigh in the blowout factor, and he could see garbage time too. That could put him upwards, 25 fantasy points, which is all you really need at that spot. So, I don't know, maybe something to consider for a tournament.
Yeah, and I like that call because it does seem like Booker has a higher floor than Patterson does as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, good call there. Nice find. Moving on to center here, the final position. Not a whole lot to see here. Nikola Vucevic back from injury, a little bit pricey for me. First game back. Not sure I want to invest there. Andre Drummond, obviously, in an ideal matchup against a team that can't rebound, can't defend. He could have himself a huge game, but he could also only play 3 quarters because the Lakers are awful. So I think the guys I'm going to be targeting are going to be, like we mentioned before the show, we were talking, Rudy Gobert. Seems like he's in a good spot once again. Blowout factor, though. You can look at Brook Lopez is cheap on DraftKings, 6.1. Who else are you looking at here?
Maybe Jordan Hill. I just don't see the Detroit bigs really following him around the perimeter, and he should get some good shots in there. He's not a guy with high upside, but he can give you the usual 25 fantasy points and just kind of be a staple in your lineup, so you can reach up to LeBron and Davis and guys like that.
Yeah.
So he's a decent cash game pick.
Yeah, I like that because there's really no other cheap options right around there.
Yeah.
I mean, you could look at Tyson Chandler, I guess, but he's been pretty bad since coming back from his injury. So I wouldn't be rostering him in a cash game. He's more of a GPP guy, especially because Cleveland playing good defense and they've been playing small decent amount recently as well.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at this, what's up with Chandler? I mean, other than the injury, looking at his game log, he's got 5 rebounds and 6 rebounds against the Lakers and the Warriors. Playing about 30 minutes each game. Like, who's getting all the rebounds if he's not for Dallas?
Dallas is now the worst rebounding team in the league. And, I mean,
yeah.
The only reason they weren't worse by far is because Chandler was getting 12, 13 boards a game. But now if he's not rebounding, I mean, that's a situation where you got to figure someone from Cleveland is going to be picking up some boards. So maybe I'm not trusting Mozgov's minutes. He's way too low for me. But if you want an upside guy in a tournament, I wouldn't mind looking at Tristan Thompson. He's a great rebounder. Not great at anything else, really. But if Cleveland decides to give him 25, 30 minutes tonight, you can see that. Or even a Kevin Love, maybe.
Yeah. I'd probably lean more towards Thompson just due to the pricing. And no one else is really in that range, as we discussed before. But yeah, in Mozgov, like you said, that's a no play for me, even though the matchup is okay. He's only seeing like 20 minutes lately.
Yeah.
I mean, they're obviously, playing him less minutes, keeping him fresh for the playoffs, it would seem. Anyway, so, I mean, they're getting away with it because Tristan Thompson's playing all right, too, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's working out well for him right now. So we'll see what the ultimate strategy is there. But anybody else you looking at center? Are we all good to go here?
Let me kind of browse down here. I don't really see anyone. It was going to be Deadman if Vucevic was out, but looks like he's in, so scratch that one off. I mean, I'm not really noticing anyone else down in this. I think Jordan Hill's probably the cutoff for me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the only other cheap option who is getting decent minutes, Thiago Splitter, low 20s, but no thanks for me. He just doesn't produce enough.
What about Asik? I mean, he has a low floor, but maybe for a cash game filler.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it. Brooklyn, like we said, not very good defensively down low. But for me, I'm going to try as much as I can to not reach at center. I'm going to try to go with some stability if possible. I think Jordan Hill, I'm with you there. He's going to get you about 20 points. Maybe he gets you closer to 30. Seems like the safe cutoff point, really.
What about Joe Valanciunas? I mean, he's been kind of his range is pretty wide, and Spurs pretty mediocre matchup. I mean, he's the same price essentially as Jordan Hill. I mean, are you feeling him at all?
My concern with him is I've noticed a lot of times late in the fourth quarter he doesn't play many minutes late in the fourth, a stretch run. So if we do see a close game, which Vegas thinks this will be a close game, I just don't know that he'll see minutes down the stretch. Like you mentioned, I mean, he's got upside. We saw 43 fantasy points three games ago, but 2 of his last 4 games, 18 or less. So, I mean, his minutes 23, then 36. I don't know. He's a GPP guy. He's definitely got some upside because it's a fine matchup, but single bullet for me.
Yeah, agree.
All right, that pretty much wraps it up for us here. Went a little bit longer than we expected on this bad slate, but hopefully we helped you guys out a little bit. And check out some great content we have at dailyfantasycafe.com. And we will see you guys again next time.